Guten Tag. Welcome to tonight's shiur. What's the Shabbos Parshas Sisa? I hope the reception, the internet seems to be a little bit on the low, the reception. So if there is a problem, let me know, and I'll switch to my mobile phone, which seems to be better. But it won't have the screen. So start off with a question which I got at the beginning of the week, the past week. Someone tells me that he noticed in Sefardi Sidurim, they do not have shiur for Shabbos. To clarify a little bit, in Nusach Ashkenaz, shiur is not necessarily standard every day. It's like an extra. It's after Oleinu. Halocho follows Kiddush and then Oleinu. And shiur is like an extra. And that's why, incidentally, why it's followed by what's called a Kiddush Yosem. By the Sefardim, they don't call the Kiddush after shiur Kiddush Yosem. They call it Kiddush Hey Shlomo. And in Kabbalah, you have a sequence of Yeridas Se'elemes and Kiddush that is the Kiddush between Shemon Esrei and Tachnun and shiur because and Volot Sion. Volot Sion is connected to Olam Habriya. Then you have a Kaddish, and then you have shiur connected to Olam HaYetzirah, and then you have a Kaddish, and then you have Ktoires Hakabe, which is connected to Olam HaAsiyah. So Al Pi Kabbalah, the Kadeshim are like the rungs between the Olamas. Why do Ashkenazim? So in old Minhag Ashkenaz, when there is a shiur, they don't say the original Minhag was only one person says Kaddish at a time. So then, all right, so they have a Kaddish after Olein. If there's two Yosoimim, Rahman Litzlan, so then the second Yosim would be said, okay, you do the Kaddish after shiur. So it became known as the Kaddish Yosim. When Chassidim, in the times of the Medritshe Maggid, switched over to Daven Nusach Sfard, so then it becomes in the Seder HaTfilah, but the name, the label, the Kaddish Yosim remain. And since Kaddish Yosim were concerned about what people would think, and therefore it's got to do with Kvedis, therefore it remained, it's called the Kaddish Yosem. But let's come back. So the Sefardim, as I was saying, by the Sefardim, they would say shiur every day as we do. After Volot Sion comes shiur, but on Shabbos there's no shiur. So I did a little bit of homework, and here you have from the Kaf HaChaim, in Simon Kuf Lamed Beis, the end of davening, that's where there are more mentions the union of shiur. And here the Kaf HaChaim brings that each day you have, when you say shiur, you should have in mind to draw down a connection, a Tosefes HaOra, a ray of Shabbos, ray of Neshama of Shabbos, a ray of Ruach of Shabbos. So each of the 6 days of the week, you're mamshich something connected to the past Shabbos. On Shabbos itself, so then, all right, so now Shabbos is providing for the next week. Therefore, there isn't this union of hamshocha, of a new hamshocha on Shabbos. That's why on Shabbos you don't need to say the shiur in the regular way. Yeah. Now, then in the Kaf HaChaim, as you can see, he refers to the Sefer Yofel Alev. That's a 12-volume set by Rav Rachmim Nisim Falaji. What the relation? I see his father was Reb Chaim Falaji, was more well known. He was a Rav in Turkey. So he discusses the Kaf HaChaim refers us to the Yofel Alev from Reb Nisim Falaji, and here he says that the opening sentence of Hashir Shahoyu Alvi Ma'im Beis Hamikdash, that is not said on Shabbos. And the reason is, normally he says, because on Shabbos, this shiur of Mizmor Shir Yom Shabbos is already said right after Baruch She'omar. Before we go to Hichvoid, etc., we say Mizmor Shir Yom Shabbos already in Psukei de Zimra. By the way, You know, the extra chapters which we say on Shabbos, on Shacharis, they are actually in the Zohar, I believe in Parshas Truma, Daf Kuf Lamed Ches, somewhere in that region talks about the extra chapters which we say on Shabbos. It goes back till then. Kol Ponim, and mentions there also about Mizbesh Shalem Shabbos. It's already included in Psukei de Zimra, which Ashkenazim also do. And at that point, in Psukei de Zimra, to start saying Hashir Shehoyu Al V'Imoim Beis Hamikdash, by the Sefardim they don't say Beis Hamikdash, they say Al Haduchan, because it wasn't in the building, it was on the outside in the platform. But at any rate, to start quoting a piece of Mishnah, says a Yofer Lalev, he says you can't say a piece of Mishnah in the middle of Psukei de Zimra, and consequently, the Sefardim just are yoitze, the Indian of Shir Shalyom. I'm saying Mizbesh Shalem Shabbos, by the fact that it said in Psukei de Zimra. Question is the other way around. Why do Ashkenazim say it separately? Possibly because we want to say the Hakdoma Hashir Shahoy Alvim Beis Hamikdash. As a result, it is said a second time to be able to address it as, especially as Shir Shalim. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Very interesting, about making a bracha shechionu on buying a new house. So Baruch Hashem, someone overseas, he has succeeded in buying a new house and is asking about, do you say shechionu? So, all right. Now, there's a Mishnah which says, Abono bayis chodosh, v'kono kelim chadoshim, that's also quoted in Shulchan Aruch, as you can see on the screen. Bono bayis chodosh, kono kelim chadoshim. So you make a bracha shechion. When the person asked me this question, my first reaction was that you don't say shechionu, and the reason is because in Perek Yud Beis in Birchas Hanehenin, the Alter Rebbe says, as you can see in the third quote on the page, that when you buy dishes, you buy equipment, even kesef v'zoh, you don't make a bracha shechionu. And he also says if you buy sforim, here there's a difference between the Alter Rebbe and the Luach and the Seder Birchas Hanehenin about making a shechionu on new sforim. So we don't make a bracha when we buy new sforim, new kelim, new dishes. Now, what's remarkable, you see the third quote on the page, where the Alter Rebbe is quoting this Mishnah. Keitzad bono bayis chodosh, oikono begodim chadoshim. So he changed in the word bono, kono, fine, when he bought a house, you built a house. But then he says, oikono begodim chadoshim. Instead of where the Mishnah says, kono kelim chadoshim, the Alter Rebbe writes, kono begodim chadoshim. And the reason is very simple. Since subsequently he's going to tell you that the minhag is not to say a bracha on kelim chadoshim, on buying gold and silver, kelim. Therefore, in the opening, instead of saying kelim chadoshim, which could mean equipment and it could mean garments, so he says kono begodim chadoshim. For that we make a bracha. All right. Today people don't make a bracha mostly on new clothes because Baruch Hashem, it's not such a big deal for us to buy new clothes. Okay. But where does it come, this Indian of not saying a bracha shechionu on buying kelim, buying a new silver cutlery? Big simcha. So here you have in the lowest quote here is from the Bis Yosef, also in the same area in Simon Chav Gimel, and it's from a Rashba. And the Rashba talks about the bracha shechionu, and he says about buying a house, make a shechionu. I haven't seen people saying a shechionu in a new house. And he says possibly because the kol she'eni bo mizman lizman kemo yadois ein mevorach shechionu. It's not a time connected celebration. You have Yom Tovim, Baruch Hashem, you come to Pesach, Baruch Hashem, you make a shechionu lizman hazeh. When you buy a new equipment, it's not connected with time. It's now I begodim, that I can say. Begodim is normal that after a year or two, whatever, how long you wear a suit, you wear a hat, whatever, you have to replace it. Therefore, it is time linked in some way. And therefore, it makes more sense to make a shechionu with manazeh on a new garment. Baruch Hashem, you worn out. The Yiddish expression "trog gesundheit" is the translation of the Hebrew "tvaleu chadesh," wear it out. Trog means wear it out. That you should wear it out in good health, and you'd have to replace it. That's why we don't say shechionu. We don't say tischadesh on shoes, because leather means another animal has to be killed to get the leather. Okay, another discussion. So we have here that there is a svara that something which is not evidently time linked, there's no bracha shechion. According to that, you can see the Rashba clearly. He says kono batim acherim, talking even about a bayis. His apprehension is even on a house, and yet the Alter Rebbe, the way I can see his wording, he doesn't diminish about bayis chodosh. He says bona bayis chodosh ekano, and that remains. Although he says klei chesed v'klei zov about not saying a shechionu, ein noegin k'levarach klal, but on a new house it looks like the Alter Rebbe remains that you should say shechionu. So that was my netiyah after looking at it more carefully, that according to what the Alter Rebbe says, here one should be saying a shechionu when buying a new house. Subsequently, I say this shiur part of it on Wednesday night. So one of the listeners, a big Talmud Chochem, he sent me, I feel very, chuffed, that there's Talmidei Chachamim who are Bekiim, etc., and they share their observations, Baruch Hashem. So he shared with me that in the Ksos HaShulchan, which for some technical reason is not going to be up on the screen, in Ksos HaShulchan he talks about this, and he's questioning whether if you buy a house, not with cash, you bought it with a mortgage, so you have the anxiety, will you be able to pay the mortgage, etc. You're not so confident that that's your house. And that, he says, possibly a reason for people not saying a shechionu on buying a new house. On the left of your screen, you have here from the Sefer Lehoiris Nossam from Nosson Gestetner. He also talks about this and differentiates between Eretz Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz. So it looks like the general minhag is not to say shechionu, but then you have the simple answer, the simple solution. You want to say shechionu, so you buy a new garment. And on this, you can say, for sure, you can say shechionu. And you spent so much money on the house, where you have money for the garment. All right, put it also on the mortgage payments. Okay, let's move on. Whenever you have a sofa for shechionu, so the eighth is to use a beged chodosh or a pri chodosh. Pri chodosh is more complicated in our climate, where many fruit are available throughout the year. There are some fruit which are seasonal, so you can say shechionu on such a fruit if it's available, and if you know what's seasonal or not. Let's move on. So someone is asking, what's the origin of the minhag of making a Kiddush, the birth of a daughter? And can you make a Kiddush just with a few friends at home? Does it have to be a Kiddush in shul? So well-known minhag Yisrael. Now, what you have on the screen is a story. Writes the following. I heard from the Horon Steipler Rebbe in Eretz Yisrael. His Zayda, the Abal Eimek Shaila, if I'm not mistaken, he was the Einikol of Tzemach Tzedek. So he writes that there was a Maisa. There was a father, and he had a daughter who's quite old, and they weren't able to find a shidduch. And they came to this Horon Steipler Rebbe, the Baal Eimek Shach, and they asked, what should they do? So he says, the reason is, your problem is because you didn't make a Kiddush when she was born. And when they make a Kiddush, then, because you didn't make a Kiddush, so then, when people make a Kiddush, the people come over and give brachas. So she didn't have all the brachas back then, and that's why the shidduch has been delayed. And consequently, this Chosid, the Talmud, made a Kiddush, and everyone gave him a bracha that he should be zeiche to megadol Torah chuppah al master tovim, and shortly afterwards she found her zivug. That's the story which he writes. Then he writes that the stipler would make a Kiddush for this story, and that's because he's named after the Horon Stipler Rebbe. So the stipler, the Kilas Yankiv, his name is Yankiv Yisrael, so he was named after the Tzemach Tzedek's grandchild. Was a Rebbe in now someone is saying there's a similar story with the Rebbe and the Shochet family. Okay, thank you. Got it. Let's move on. So yeah, so then all right, so there's the Indian of making a Kiddush, and does it have to be Dafka and Shul? Of course, the more brachas you get, the better. I must tell you, today there was a Kiddush here in Stamford Hill for someone, a Spinker Chassid. He hadn't had, he's 12 years. He's been waiting for a child, and Baruch Hashem, he made a huge Kiddush. And apparently he had this, the way he tells the story, he had sponsored a major overhaul of a mikveh somewhere in Eretz Yisrael, and he attributes to this the schus that he was now, Baruch Hashem, celebrating the birth of his first child after so many years of waiting. Baruch Hashem. Now, the next question which we have is, so we don't have on the screen, is a child last Shabbos. When a shliach writes to me, his little child emptied the urn of hot water. This is, I understand it's a Beis Chabad, and you have people coming, and there's no hot water. So not just for the family, but for all the people coming. He's asking in the future, I don't answer the phone on Shabbos, he's asking in the future, would he be able to ask a goy to boil the fresh water, and the goy will have a cup of coffee, so he's having hanoah, and then he can, everyone else will also have hanoah. The halacha is actually absolutely no, that's not okay, and it goes even much further than that. Even if there's a case of pikuach nefesh, and so you're calling, and even if even on your day it doesn't matter. That you're not allowed to have leftovers of water, which is, or food which is heated, which was cooked for a case of pikuach nefesh. And the reason is shema yarbe bishvilei, in case when they're ready doing it, they might do a bit more for you, so you're not allowed to have benefit from it. That's the halacha there in Shiur Chesif Hey. I just want to throw in a practical thing. Very often, Baruch Hashem, here in London, if someone is in hospital, so sein für gute Sachen. So there is kosher meals. So they come in the hospital, have a supply of kosher meals, and the patient will choose which menu, and then they will warm it up. The staff will warm it up, and comes mealtime twice a day, they will bring a hot kosher meal. Very often the case is that the patient doesn't have an appetite, and the visitor who's walked 4 miles or whatever to be there does have an appetite. So the shaila is the visitor allowed to have the shirayim of the patient? So, and the answer is yes. That's why I did some research years ago. That was my conclusion: is if they had mamish boiled water, which is mamish ishal of bishul, then no, you wouldn't be allowed to. But if it's just that they reheated a meal, so my understanding at the time was that that's not called a full malacha, and consequently, if the patient isn't interested in eating it, so the visitor would be allowed to enjoy it. Let's now go on to the next thing, and that is a very unusual shaila for this part of the world. That's in urban settings. So we have a shaila, someone has chickens, he breeds chickens, he, she, whatever, and they have and they use the eggs for themselves, perhaps for, I don't know, for commercial, but they have breed chickens for eggs. And one night he hears major screaming, the whole chaos there. So he realizes that or possibly there's a fox has found its way into the chicken coop, and he runs over and he manages to chase away the fox. So now, okay, so now Baruch Hashem, all the chickens seem to be now safe. But now there's a ma'aseh with a sofek Drusah. The ma'aseh is that if a animal of prey claws into an animal or a bird, so then sometimes it could be that it's pierced into the inner organs, and that would make the animal or the bird treif. And that's in Hilchos Treifos, the Siman Nun Zayin talks about this, that if the animal is quiet, the animal of prey, and the birds, the victims, are all screaming, then the likelihood is that they had been mauled, and as a result, every one of those chickens is now a sofek treif. Now, if a chicken is treif doesn't mean dead, yeah? Treif means it's been mortally wounded. If a chicken is treif, if it lays an egg, that egg is also forbidden. Similarly, if a cow is treif, so then that milk of that cow is forbidden milk. This is a common thing that they have in dairy farms. Sometimes there's a cow which has got some gas problem, and the vet will make a cut in the back of the cow, near the back, and to relieve the gas problem. That cut makes the animal treif halacha. So when a hechsher is given on milk, so in addition to just like the mashgiach seeing the cow being milked, also they have to verify that the cows which are being milked haven't done this operation upon them. And every cow has got a logbook, called a passport. Every cow has got a logbook, and so for the cows used for producing milk for kosher will have to be those which have not had such an operation. Because, as I say, if an animal became treif, so the milk which it produces is treif for milk. And similarly, if a hen lays eggs, but if the hen is treif because it's been mauled, so those eggs are treif. So what's the solution? So now let's take a look here in Yeridea. This is actually in two places in Yeridea. One is in Siman Nun Zayin, where it talks about animals being mauled, and Siman Pevov in the Dinim. So here you can read, Treifo eino yoledes. There is an understanding halacha that a creature which is mortally wounded will not give birth. Now, a bird which has been through a situation and maybe it became treif as a result, if it lays eggs, that in the body of the hen, there's a cluster of eggs. And that cluster, if it was mauled, but that cluster it will still be able to produce, but it won't be able to produce another batch of eggs. But if the hen starts another batch, so then kosher, then that bird, that hen is kosher. Renee does it. How will we know whether it's a new batch or on the old batch? If there's a 21 full days in elapse, that's like the pregnancy of a chicken, of a hen, so that it can carry eggs inside it for a maximum of 21 days. And then after that, if it survives 21 days and continues to produce eggs, so then those eggs are confirmation that it's not treifa, because had it been treifa, it would not be able to continue producing eggs. So that's the solution here. And certainly after 21 days, any eggs that should be laid in this coop, you can rely that that hen hadn't been mauled. Let's move on to the next question. And that is, someone's asking a question. Going back to the previous question about Kiddushim. So this is a shliach who's in a place where there's not many Shomer Shabbos. on the advice of a Rov, to minimize Chilul Shabbos, we made the Kiddush for our youngest daughter on a weekday instead, since many extra people would come for the Simcha. Would you advise that we do a Kiddush for each of them on a Shabbos too? We now have a shul with a weekly Kiddush anyway, which was not the case when they were born. Interesting question. I think you've already made the celebration, so whether it was on a Shabbos Kiddush or a weekday Kiddush, or whatever you want to call it, weekday celebration, but you had the brachas of people, so I don't think there's necessity to start making a new Kiddush. Maybe she'll help them, the Shidduchim should come on time. If Chas v'Sholom there's problems, then you can always make another Kiddush, yeah? Right, so someone asked me just mamish this past week that the men's mikveh, so there's the room where the sink is just outside, and the door is often open. So is it okay to make a bracha when you wash your hands? Is it to wash your hands and to make a bracha at that position? So the simple answer is that when the fact there's a different room does not protect from the exposure of erva. Let's make it clear. It says in the Torah that v'hoya machanecha kodesh, your camp should be holy. When there's exposure of erva, that kivyochel pushes away the presence of the Shekhinah. That's why we cannot say a bracha in the presence of an exposed erva. Now, what if the erva is covered over by a glass, a window? That's called erva ba'ashoshis. That doesn't solve the problem. It still remains the exposure of erva, so you're not allowed to make a bracha when there's an erva, when there's uncovered parts of the body, which are normally covered. I'm talking about the lower parts. So then, even if it'd be through a window, a clear window, you wouldn't be allowed to make a bracha. Certainly, if there's a door open between yourself and the dressing room, and there are people there who are undressed, so then you wouldn't be allowed to make a bracha. If you turned your back to the room, you've turned your back, you're looking the other direction, because you are in another room, then you could make a bracha, because technically it's another room. What about the water? So we know that the Rebbe was, this is from various sources, we know that the Rebbe was quite concerned that water for Negelwasser, etc., shouldn't be taken from a Beis HaKisei. So I heard that when the Rebbe visited Mochin Chana, he made this observation, and certainly the Rebbe's house, we're told that the Rebbe is very particular. Water used for Negelwasser, which you want, it should be pure. It shouldn't be taken from a room which has got a Ruach HaTumah. For years, I used to schlep water. When I heard this, I used to carry water from downstairs to our middle floor where our bedroom is, night after night, when I was not so too exhausted. And eventually, we installed another sink in the hallway on the bedroom floor, so that there should be availability to have water for Negelwasser, etc., without having to take it from the bathroom. And I don't know if some of you may receive the Compass magazine. I was asked to write an article about doing Shabbos in hotels. So in hotels, usually the sinks are together with the Beis HaKisei. So the simple solution is, Baruch Hashem, today bottled water is available. And so you find either you use bottled water or you go downstairs or by the lobby. Usually there's a place there you can get water which isn't mamish in a Beis HaKisei, and then to use water from there for Negelwasser. So coming back, so here the sink room, which is outside the room of the dressing room, I think is in that respect is a separate room, and therefore the inyan of Ruach Ra wouldn't be a problem. Let's just see what someone's putting here. Okay, let's move on. So someone's asking me a question. Oh, so here is that. Let's actually read. The screen is a little bit further right. Okay, so this is here about the hot water. Now this is again shiur. As I was saying it, Valpeh, I was a little bit apprehensive. So let's read it inside. Even if you cooked water or food for through a goy, whether for a choyle sheyesh b'sakana, choyle she'ein b'sakana, a bori, someone who's healthy, would not be allowed to partake of that water or that hot food. In case you might come to ask them to cook more. So therefore, even if the guy cooks something beheter, even for a choyle, but that's not heter for any extra drinks or extra food beyond what was done with the tzarech. Okay. Someone's asking, what about a bathroom without a toilet? I think it's the same thing. It's a mokim, which is it's a derech for people to stand there naked, and therefore it's an Indian of ruach ra. There is room to differentiate. Yeah, there's a room to differentiate that in early times bygone, the bathhouse was physically had vapor. So it was you'd come in, you'd feel the atmosphere. Today's bathrooms is no different to a regular room. That's on the vapor side. On the other aspect of a mokim shepenei odom marumim, it's the same thing. It's meyuchid for people to be standing there undressed, and therefore it's it's not befitting for saying brachos, etc. Okay. So someone's asking if a yid comes afterwards. All right, after I cooked on, but if the pashtus is not okay. Let's go on to the next question. Can I then donate stocker on account of my future meiser? So there is a sefer on stocker from the Chofetz Chaim. It's called Avas Chesed. And there he writes that you can. So again, there's some need which has come up to my attention. My meiser kitty is empty, so I want to give £200 from my own money on account that next month that will be from my meiser. So he says that that's okay. In Torah it makes a lot of sense. It's just apprehensive. You could say it's whatever. But you have poskim say it is okay, so yeah, the answer is yes. Let's move on to the next question. Foods, so power of foods baked in an oven that was just now used for pizza. Now, for those who are not aware, pizza is usually made with cheese. So then you have an oven which was just used for pizza, and then you put in some potatoes or something par. Now, does that par of food become milchik to the degree that if I eat it, I now become milchik, and now I wouldn't be able to have fleshik within whatever time I have to wait? So again, that's the question: is how far does the taste transfer? So if you can see on the notes, I have a reference to a Sefer HaKashrus, which is a very contemporary Sefer, and he addresses this, and he says, no, it does not make you milchik. So again, you warmed up, you cooked part of a food in a milchik facility, and he says, even though it's not perfectly clean, okay, so that food, those potatoes which you cooked in that oven, you won't have them with meat, but it's not such a strong thing to make you subject to become milchik, etc. Just to explain it perhaps a little bit more, min haTorah, you're only in violation of basar b'cholov if milk and meat were cooked together. Min haTorah, if you had a sandwich, which a slice of salami and a slice of cheese, and you ate them together, min haTorah, that's not an avera. But certainly midrabanon, there's a story in the Gemara about someone who says, in this respect of waiting between milk and meat, I am like vinegar, the son of wine. My father, if he had meat today, he wouldn't eat cheese till tomorrow. And I wait from one meal to the next. That's the basis of the Minhag Yisrael, which is brought in Shulchan Aruch, of waiting whether 6 hours or 1 hour, etc. But that's but this is all on the level of Minhag Toiv, which is mentioned in Gemara. But to say that because you had parve potatoes cooked in a milchik oven, therefore you should also be bound that you can't have fleishiks, etc., for the next amount of time, or the other way around. One doesn't have to be machmir so much. That's what this Sefer HaKashrus brings. I didn't trace his sources, but it's a davar hamistaber. Right. I'm going to finish a little early today. I want to share with you 2 more things. One is about Shalom Aleichem. So last week we discussed about saying Shalom Aleichem if you're doing Kiddush Levana and you're all alone. There's no one else there to say Shalom Aleichem to. Do you say Shalom Aleichem to the moon? And so someone, my future chosen, future Edom, he sent me that the reference to the Sharet Tefillah. Now, Sharet Tefillah is the earlier edition of Shar HaKoil. So the Rebbe's Elter Zeder, Rav Ram Dovid Lavut, Rav Nikolaev, so he publishes a Siddur. He published a Torah Siddur. Now, just it may be of interest, and he passed away Tov Resh Mem Tes in, I think, somewhere around then. In Tov Resh Chov Ches, that's 20 years earlier, there's a Siddur published in Vilna, and he's very much involved in that publication. In the Rebbe's, in the Rabbeim's Sforim, which are in captivity in Moscow, there is a Siddur which belonged to the Rebbe Maharash, his personal Siddur, and that was published in Vilna Tov Resh Chov Ches, and Rav Lavut was involved with this. You can see in the beginning of the volume, you can see that he's involved in the preparation for printing. Kolponim, at some stage, I'm not sure which year, he publishes Shar Tefillah, which is a study of the Inyanim of Tefillah. And later on, he published a new edition called Shar HaKoil. In the Rebbe's Rishimis, Rishimis HaYomen, there's a comment that the Rebbe Rashab was born Tov Resh Chov Aleph. So he was, when the Rebbe Maharash passed away, he was 22 years old in Tov Resh Mem Gimel. And the Rebbe Rashab gave stacks of information, of comments to Rav Lavut. Rav Lavut was shocked that such a young person should have such a wealth of information. And there is, if I'm not mistaken, an expression, a halva Shar HaKoil is von dem Taten, that 50% of the Shar HaKoil is von dem Taten. Anyway, the Rebbe Rashab was evidently very involved in giving feedback and contributions to the Shar HaKoil. So now we have this story in the first edition. So he says the following: V'ra'isi me'admur ba'al tzemach tzedek zal. This is Rav Lavut's writing in the first edition. I saw from the Rebbe the Tzemach Tzedek that he was in a Kaddish Levana on his own, and he said Shalom Aleichem on his own, and that is corresponding to, that fits to the reason of the Mekubalim, that you say Shalom Aleichem for a spiritual reason and not necessarily to the one who's standing next to you. All right, so you have here that the Tzemach Tzedek said Kiddush Levana on his own, and he said Shalom Aleichem on his own. Then you see that this story is not in this next edition. See, it was taken out, obviously, knowingly, it was taken out from the next edition. Why was it taken out? I have a question. How can you say, first of all, Bechal Rebbe has people with him, he has a Gaboim, etc. How could it be that he said Kiddush Levana on his own and someone saw it? If someone saw it, then the Rebbe wasn't on his own. So the mice is a bit of a strange mice. And Lavut is not saying that he saw it himself. It seems that he read somewhere something like that. But at any rate, strange story, and the strongest thing is that it's not printed. It was taken out in the subsequent edition, which means that it doesn't have the full credibility. Maybe it was a lady. That was last week's discussion. You can say Shalom Aleichem to your wife also. I mean, it wasn't his wife; it was another woman. The Apostle Ada. Okay, let's move on. Okay, ein letzte Sach, and that is about being mafsik between shel yad and shel rosh. Now, I mentioned last week that the Alter Rebbe in the Siddur says different to the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch says, do not interrupt between shel yad and shel rosh to answer davar shebekdusha, because then you're going to have to say an extra bracha on the shel rosh. In the Siddur, where he says normally on shel rosh you don't say a bracha al mitzvahs tefillin, but if you are caught in the middle of putting on tefillin and you hear Kaddish, so you should answer. As a result, you're going to have to say an extra bracha. But Ashkenazim always say al mitzvahs tefillin, so no big deal. That occasionally you're going to say an extra bracha on the shel rosh. That's the Alter Rebbe's hachra. What discussed last week was the Alter Rebbe says so about Kiddush, of Kaddish, and of Baruch. He does not mention Moedim. Although nearby he talks about being mafsik in the middle of Birchas Krishma, he mentions Moedim on the same footing as the other three, as Davar Shebekdusha. Here he doesn't mention Moedim. And I mentioned last week that Rav Lemberg, in his Sefer Hefsek B'Tfilin, the later edition, he says that you should not be mafsik to answer Moedim Anachnu Loch between Shel Yad and Shel Rosh. So after Shabbos, I got a message from Rav Schollenberg Weinberg in Kansas City, who is included in the list of eminent Talmidei Chachamim who enjoy listening to this year. So he sends me back a message that when he turned bar mitzvah, so his father, Rav Yossel Weinberg, his father brought him to Reb Shmuel Avitan, and Reb Shmuel told him this, that although it looks like in the Siddur you should be mafsik, the poil you shouldn't be mafsik between shel yad and shel rosh, even to answer Amish Minah. But this is very practical. Yeah, Masuda Dike mentioned, make sure that by the time the chazan starts hoidu, they are already wearing talis and film, and they start together with the chazan. But not everyone is so Masuda, and it turns out that many people are putting on film, but the chazan is saying Kaddish, or they would be shiur, or saying Kaddish D'Rabbanan. It's a very common thing. So should you be mafsik in middle to answer? So the Alter Rebbe says yes. Now Reb Shmuel Avitan is saying no. So here we have a letter from the Rebbe. Yeah, it's from Chelik Tezvo, page Kuf Pei Hey. Mileshein Admor Hazokin Shloi Levatel Chulu Mukech Dechiyuv. So this is the Rebbe is responding, relating to this thing about B'Shel Yad Shel Rosh, and the Alter Rebbe says that let's read the Lashon here in note Dal. Now the notes, what you have on the screen here, this is from the Shulchan Menachem, where they've got the letters of the Rebbe Al Seder of Shulchan Aruch, those things which are negei Halocho. So the Alter Rebbe in Siddur says you can rely on the Svara to always say Al Mitzvahs Tefillin on the Shel Rosh. Normally we don't say a bracha on the Shel Rosh, but he says you can rely on them Sheloi Livotel Meyanias Davar Shebekdusha, not to miss out on answering a Davar Shebekdusha. So the Rebbe is reading from those words Sheloi Livotel Mukach Dechiyuv. That's a shiur to interrupt. Okay. Last week I mentioned something about a letter of the Frierdiker Rebbe during the war and read to the Chassidim in Vilna. And so this is what's in the footnotes over here. So let's read this carefully. The Igros Kodesh of the Frierdiker Rebbe says the following: Av shal pidin, you're allowed to be mafsik between shel yad and shel rosh. And when you interrupt to answer Amen of Kaddish or Kiddush, then you have to make another bracha on the shel rosh. However, royal Adayik should be careful not to be mafsik between the shel yad and shel rosh, and sheloi laharbez bebrachas, and not to incur making an extra bracha. So ostensibly, this is contrary to what the Alter Rebbe says, and this is possibly the source what Reb Shmuel Avitan was saying about not answering. So in the notes of the publisher, so they suggest that it's not a contradiction here between the Frierdiker Rebbe's letter and what the Rebbe is saying and what the Alter Rebbe says, that there is a shiur, that if you are confronted in the middle of putting on tefillin, you are obliged to interrupt. The Friedrich Rebbe is writing, it means you should be careful to avoid getting into a situation where you'd have to be mafsik. So let's say you're putting on tefillin, they're about to start Kiddush, so wait with your putting on tefillin, or you can, if you are able to have the influence, they should wait another minute till you put on your shel rosh, and then that way you avoid getting into the situation. But if you are already in that situation, but then you should be mafsik. And indeed, he says you can read this into the words of the Friedrich Rebbe's letter. He says, which is an interesting lashon. Yeah, it doesn't say categorically you should not be mafsik. It doesn't say, yeah, because he's saying take the efforts that you shouldn't come into a situation where you have to be mafsik. I'm going to share with you one last thing which I don't have on the screen, and that is that someone sent me a question about a door, which the regular front door, but the top is domed, a curved top. Now, very interesting, because we just learned in Gemara Yumer, so we just learned this discussion about a domed top door. And the Halocho is for sure, it's got a 10 tefachim height and 4 tefachim width. There's no question it's chayiv b'mezuzah. So now, the question here is, how do you measure the inyan of the top third? And this is a serious dilemma. So the question is like this. I've got the vertical doorposts, and then I've got a curved top. Does the curved top all belong to the lintel, and therefore the mezuzah should be on the top third of the straight posts? Or do you say no, a little bit of the top is obviously the lintel, but the rest is like the doorposts, and therefore you should put the mezuzah in the top third of the overall height? And that can sometimes be a bit of a conflict, but the way that I don't have the picture on the screen, it should be as high as possible on the straight path. If it's a conflict, I would still say to put it on the straight rather than the curved. There is a svara, first of all, there is a svara, as you know, that if it's a very tall door, says in Yerushalmi, you can put it on shoulder height. This Yerushalmi is also quoted in Tosfos and Yuma, which we just learned. So that's brought in poskim, that if it's a very tall door, some poskim say you put it shoulder height, although the Rebbe Rashab told Rav Lando to put it on the top third even with a tall doorway. Okay, but that's one cheshbon. Another, some poskim say, although lechatchila the mezuzah should be in the top third, but if it's in the top half, it's still considered kosher. So just to summarize this last point, when you have a doorway which starts off straight verticals and then you've got a dome on top, it would be something to ask a shiur exactly how to measure how do you measure the top third, where to put up the mezuzah, and if it's negei l'maaseh, ask a shiur, and hopefully you'll get good guidance. I see one last question here. Is milk from a treif cow mixed with milk from a kosher cow, does it become kosher? The answer is no. If the milk was, if you have a mixture of non-kosher and kosher, so the general psak is that is not kosher. That's all right. I'll wish you all a good avoch, and it should be living up to the inyan of marbim b'simcha. So we should see lots of simcha, and simchas hagula, gula of the hostages, a shalom, nasati shalom ba'aretz, and geula shlema with the Mashiach tzidkeinu b'meher yameinu mamash.
Amen.
Good.